built a $25 million business off of $15,000 of bar mitzvah money and like a couple of tens of thousands.
And an incredible amount of cash flow management. We didn't know what the fuck we were doing, but we had unbelievable heart. Like, people bled for that company 7 days a week. You know, this was in a time when like I was sleeping at the office.
I have people calling me, asking me if they can, like, you know, send me a Zelle to go to my Dorsia and book them a table at a restaurant. Like, how are you able to generate this type of consumer excitement and engagement? And again, this is, you and I met less than a year ago when you're doing this, so I'd like to understand how you do it. Welcome back to Rise, Life Stories of Accomplished Individuals. As always, the purpose of this podcast is to speak with my guests to extract as much value and as much information about their lives and how they got to where they are. So today we have Marc Lotenberg with us. Marc, how's it going, man?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. Look, I really appreciate it. You and I met we actually met through our wives.
Yeah.
And I remember when we first met, we met at our mutual friend, I think it was Max.
Yeah, sure.
At Max Shrakansky at his birthday party. And our wives knew each other, I think, from business because, remind me your wife's name again. Eden, yes, because Eden, I think she was an executive at a fashion brand.
Yep.
And I guess they had known each other.
Theory, yeah.
Yes, Theory, and they had known each other through that, and then you and I were introduced. And I remember shortly after that, we went to dinner, and you told me about Dorsia. And I remember the four of us were discussing it. We were at Zizi's, and we were discussing Dorsia, and I remember you telling me about it. And I remember I was both fascinated and skeptical.
Yeah.
I was fascinated because it seemed like such a genius idea, and I'm going to get into your kind of your accolades, which describes the app, and we're going to talk about it in depth. And I remember thinking it was genius because, like, this whole kind of yield management and maximization and supply and demand, when it comes to in-demand restaurants, knowing for myself firsthand how difficult it is to get into restaurants, and you've solved this through technology. So at first I thought it was genius, but I was skeptical. Because from my past experience, I had a restaurant directory back in 1999, dealing with restaurant owners. Granted, not the restaurant owners at the caliber that you work with, but it was just difficult.
Yeah.
Logistics, I'm sure. Yeah. Logistics, communications, everything. So I was a little skeptical about it because I was wondering if you'd be able to, like, execute on something as big as what you were planning to do. So let me jump into your accolades, and then we'll take it from there. So Marc Lotenberg is a media CEO and entrepreneur turned hospitality tech founder with his latest venture, Dorsia, a members-only app with access to reservations at the most in-demand restaurants in New York City, the Hamptons, Miami, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and London. Prior to Dorsia, Marc was CEO of W Magazine. At about the time, they were purchased by Condé Nast. Within a little over a year under Marc's leadership, W Magazine was again successfully sold. Marc is also the CEO of Surface Media, which acquired Surface Magazine in 2012, and also includes SurfaceMag.com, Surface Studios, a custom publishing division, an e-commerce platform called Design Dose. He successfully refreshed the brand and magazine within the first year and has grown it into a profitable multi-channel media company. He also oversaw its first successful licensing partnership in 2016 with the launch of SurfaceHotels.com. In 2013, Surface was included in Inc.'s list of fastest growing companies. In 2008, Forbes named Marc on its 30 under 30 list, and in 2019 referred to him as the coolest CEO. Did I get that right?
A lot of it. There's a couple of things. I think it was 2009, not 2019. I wasn't cool in 2019.
You weren't cool in 2019?
I mean, different cool, but yeah.
Gotcha. There's a lot missing from here. And there's a lot missing from here simply because it's not online, and I can't find it. So, you and I have talked, and there's a huge involvement in the hospitality industry. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of the hospitality industry? Because I just want to finish up on kind of your bio and your accolades and then jump into your life story.
Yeah, I mean, I started in hospitality, like I didn't even know what hospitality was, but I love the idea of bringing people together. And at 16, I was promoting proms in high school, and with like no.
You're promoting what? Sorry.
Proms.
Okay.
Which was a thing back then. You would buy tickets to these proms, and it's where like kids in high school would go after prom to party, where you'd be able to drink and party. Before it got shut down years later. But it was with, Noah, Jason, all these guys that now run huge.
Noah and Jason from Tao.
Yeah.
Tao Group. Okay.
Yeah, there was a whole group of people that were doing these proms back then. And they devised a system that was really interesting. Like you would create turfs. Like I had a certain number of schools. And the only way to get the tickets for those schools, like once there was like 5 of us who had the different schools all over Long Island. And like, I had my zone, like no one can sell to those schools. I'd buy the tickets from them, mark it up, and we'd buy them from 20. They were selling for like 80, and along the way, you just kept making your piece. And then you'd get other people in each school to be like kind of your lead. So like 16, 17, I was bringing all this cash from, promoting these proms, which if you wanted to go out after prom, you had to go to. You're not talking about the prom itself. You're talking about the after party. After party in the city. Like you'd leave Long Island, the prom sucked, and then you go into the city and go party at like Expo or these clubs that were like these big, mega clubs back then.
And so you were 16 and you were selling these tickets for the after parties to obviously kids who were older than you who were graduating.
Yeah. And then I went to the junior prom, and then I got taken by a girl to someone's junior prom, and then I went to my junior prom and senior prom. So I went to 3 proms, but I saw the power of like events and marketing and people wanting to get into something. They would kind of like beg, borrow, steal to get into like the cool event. And I always just got fascinated with that. And then I started like promoting other clubs. And I mean, there was so many clubs back then, but in high school and even college, I went to Arizona State University, which was like the party school.
Was that what it's known for?
Yeah.
Okay. So you said, so then when you got old enough, then you started you went to your junior prom. Okay.
Yeah, and then I started promoting. I wound up going to college, and I was still promoting clubs in the city because I'd go back and forth. And I wasn't even 21 yet at the time, and I was getting in. My brother's 5 years older. Yeah. So like they would all hit me up to get into these places, and it was just like I just watched how the power of bringing people together and creating a good time. There was definitely business into it, and I kept doing stuff throughout college, and it was a different world then. But I started this magazine right out of college. That was
944.
Yeah.
So you started. Okay. So tell me about that. You know what? It's interesting because when I was doing research about you, I saw actually on Wikipedia there's a section about you and about some of your ventures, and there was 944 magazine, and on the cover Paris Hilton was on the cover.
Yes.
So, I'm trying to understand, how old were you when you were able to get Paris Hilton on the cover of your magazine?
So I was, at that point, let's figure it was 2007 or 8. I was 27, 28,
okay.
We were 26 maybe. I started it in 2001.
Okay.
And yes, but we were marketing like crazy. We opened up all these different cities, and that was at a time when there wasn't social media, there wasn't Instagram, there wasn't Facebook.
I remember.
There wasn't even an iPhone yet. The iPhone came out like 2007, 2008. Like that was literally about the time when she was on the cover when the iPhone came out, and it was still not really the iPhone that everyone was still on BlackBerry Messenger. Everyone was still BlackBerry then.
How did you make the transition from, promoting events and selling tickets to events to a publication? And this wasn't exclusively, was it a digital publication or was
it was print, but we built the first digital workflow system. Like that's where I got kind of exposed to tech. Was I went to school for supply chain management. I wanted to do a magazine because I didn't want to like be a promoter or like work in the clubs. I was like, all right, what? So like the only thing I could think of is like everyone liked themselves being seen going to these clubs. I would build a magazine that just had photos of everyone out at night, but build it in a way that the current magazines were showing. It took like 6 months to make a print magazine back then, because it was like with film and all these metal plates, and it was like a real old school printing process. And I was like, there's got to be a way to. Digital camera just came out in 2001. It was like 0.5 megapixel. It was really, really small quality. But I looked at it, I was like, you know what? the photos are going to be so small in the back of the magazine, I could build a whole like system on a digital workflow that we shoot the whole thing in digital, especially all the people out at night.
Yeah.
And the resolution was going to be fine enough because we were printing it. It wasn't like it was on a beautiful piece of film. It was printed on, magazine paper. So we wound up figuring out a way to build this process where we'd ship most of the magazine, in advance, and then just hold the picture pages right at the end. So people would see themselves from, 3-4 nights ago. And we got it to a point where in Vegas, I remember we 3-4 years later, we really built up the tech. And for the Halloween parties, we would have everything printed, everything ready to go. And we would just shoot the Halloween parties at the end. So like a party that was Thursday and Friday night, by Saturday afternoon, the magazines were distributed all over the pools and casinos, and people were still in like the makeup from the night before, wondering like, how in the world is this happening?
Sorry, but you lost me there. How are you able to take those digital images from the night before and get them to print that quickly?
So we built this this ERP system, which was...
What does ERP stand for?
Enterprise Resource Planning. It's like a supply chain thing.
Yeah.
But the concept was, as the photographers were taking the photos, we'd have them upload to our own kind of like cloud. Back then there wasn't a cloud or anything like that.
And your own hard drives.
Yeah, we'd literally have them upload to a cloud that we built, and our designers that at night, they were all built into templates, would flag which photos. It would automatically put them into these like picture page templates, send it right to the printer, and they would just print those remaining, that one form. The rest of everything else was already printed. It was already aligned in the binderies. Like it was a real like kind of a just in time. It's called just in time, which is like how Toyota builds the cars.
So, I mean, you were gathering attention, you were really getting people's attention in the moment, like literally within the next like 24 to 48 hours after they had attended an event, and you were drawing them back into your publication because they wanted to see themselves in this publication.
And the photos would get uploaded to our site and websites back then, like people, like that's where you got the information from. There wasn't social then, but our website was getting hit with like, at night, and this was a time when people dressed differently and went to the clubs differently. At night, those images would be up there. So we'd have hundreds and hundreds of thousands. It started getting to millions of page views. We didn't know no one knew what the value of a click was or then. So it was before social. I mean, we kicked ourselves afterwards because we should have built an app with the photos, but like we were so ahead on so many things, but social really kind of like screwed us up.
So with that, social screwed you up.
Yeah.
Well, hold on a second. With that many page views, I mean, how are you? Were display ads out yet? No, they weren't. Like was ads?
They were.
Is that how you were monetizing?
We had display ads for sure, but it wasn't at the numbers that digital was so early. Brands didn't want to really commit to real dollars. It was still kind of an unknown thing, but we definitely had a lot of display. But if we kept on it, it would have been a different world. I mean, look, 2009 came and rattled our cage a bit. It really killed the whole like nightlife, and all of the markets we were in 10 markets. We were printing like 300, 400,000 copies, 10 different, each city had their own magazine.
300, 400,000 copies, how often?
Every month.
Every month?
Yeah.
And your monetization was through sponsorship?
Through print ads.
Print ads.
Yeah.
So you had like a separate division of like, you had a business development division with people going out and...
Oh, there was 150 full-time employees. It was like a thing back then.
And this is still under 944?
This was all under 944.
So how long did 944 go on for?
After 2009, it went into a reorganization, which we took it out of, and then we sold it in 2011 to a media company, actually out of South Florida, and then the tech, which was actually the best part of the whole company in the grand scheme of things. Like, if I did it all over again, I would have made it into a SaaS platform. Like SaaS wasn't a thing yet. No. But I would have, every media company was after us. In 2008, we were getting all these offers. And, I remember I had a really wealthy investor, and we were looking at it, and he was just like, what are you going to do? You're like going to be frustrated because you're going to be like not rich enough to have the plane and the boat, but you won't have to worry about money. So like, you're just going to be frustrated if you take these deals. And, he had multiple planes, he had all this stuff back then. So I was like, all right, this is, he's right. What am I going to do? I'm going to be like frustrated that I can't afford all that stuff. So we're like, all right, and the company was really doubling, tripling every single year. So we're going to roll the dice and just go for a bigger deal. And then the economy collapsed. So that wasn't probably the best solution. But the software, every media company was after us for this tech, and we were, we were so inexperienced at the time. We were like, no, we're not going to let you use our tech. That's our secret weapon.
Right.
Why would we ever let you use that? Then, in the grand scheme of things, we should have just licensed it out to then there was hundreds and thousands of media companies back then because magazines were still a thing. We should have just licensed it off as a software company. But so that was a big learning lesson.
How did you? Okay, so you went to school. You went to school for logistics, right?
I mean, I had a lot of problems in the beginning of school. I had a lot of attention issues. I didn't want to stay in school. And then I went to this guidance counselor, and they're like, why don't you try this thing called supply chain management? I think your brain will work well with it. And I went there first class. I was like, oh my God, I'm hooked. And I actually went from sitting in the back of the class, not paying attention, flirting with girls, to sitting in the front of the class, knowing every answer before. I just breezed through it. I didn't study, didn't do any of that. The teachers who I became friends with were like, this is weird. You're actually you just knew the subject matter. So it was a.
But how did you combine? You never actually went into anything to do with supply chain. So how did you combine this kind of this knowledge and this love for hospitality and media? You fused hospitality and media to create this opportunity with 944, but you didn't really.
I knew nothing about magazines. I wanted to start it. I was like, all right, but I was New York kind of, ego, think I could do whatever the hell I wanted, and went out there and I was like, I'm going to start a magazine. I would just knock on people I would just go to places that I was eating at. I would just go to the owner and say, hey, I want to start a magazine. Will you support me? Will you buy some ads? They're like, yeah, what's your distribution? What's this? I was like, fuck, I don't know. And just start writing down notes distribution, editorial strategy, what's your calendar? And I just go to 10 of these people, and they all kept saying the same things.
These are restaurants.
These were restaurants, and they were saying, what's your distribution strategy? So I was like, everyone keeps asking about distribution. Why don't we just build something with an amazing distribution, something different than what's out there? And we're going to print the magazine and put it in all the cool spots where everyone goes, build our own custom displays, and fuck the newsstand, forget all the other stuff. And we're just going to build we're going to make sure that really cool people were reading the magazine, wherever they went.
How did you do that? How did you get that distribution? Where were you circulating the physical copies of the magazine?
I mean, from the cool hair salons, the gyms, the restaurants, the clubs, anywhere where that audience was going, we built this cool display and put it into the places. And the places were like, all right, cool, you're going to put this beautiful, at the time it was a cool printed object compared to the crappy things that were out there. And we use it as a thing, hey, we're going to market that if you want to pick up 944, you have to go to one of these 200 places in town.
Right. And how many cities were you in?
10.
You were in 10 cities. Okay. So, and you mentioned you had 150 employees.
Yeah.
So, at what period of time did it go from when you started this business, when you first started? And again, is there? I want to make sure I keep everything straight and I piece it together correctly. The business taking photos of people, and this is also 944. This is all part of 944?
Yeah, I mean, it was more than just photos of people. The editors will be we were basically taking the local celebrity and mixing them with the national celebrity. So on the cover would be, Jay-Z on the cover, but inside would be a feature on a local, a local business person or a local, fashion designer or a local, entrepreneurship wasn't what it is today, but there would be different features of stories of people. And in the back of the magazine were all these photos. That was the hook that everyone wanted to pick up for.
I understand. To get people in, so if you call it kind of if you equate it today to on YouTube, the thumbnail or the title, to get people interested in that piece of content, that was for every issue. Your thumbnail was the cover, and then the content from if I understand you correctly, the content were these images of individuals in the back for people to come there to see themselves in the magazine at a later date. But those covers. And I wanna in a second, I wanna understand the timeline of how you grew this business. But the covers of these magazines, I mentioned finding Paris Hilton on the cover. You just mentioned Jay-Z was on the cover. I'm assuming with A-list celebrities of this nature, there were probably a lot more. And my guess is that you were doing this strategically to get people interested in the magazine that wherever they found it, as you mentioned, at the gym, at the hair salon, like the local kind of cool places where people were congregating, they would pick it up because of these celebrities on the cover. But you're very nonchalant about the way you talk about it. And I understand that by being in the business and doing it for so long, for you, it's like, it's not a big deal. I had Jay-Z on the cover. But to a normal person, kind of to a layman who doesn't have access to these kind of celebrities, I guess my question to you is, before we get into the timeline of the business, because I want to understand how long it took to get to the scale, how did you get Jay-Z on the cover of this magazine? Yeah,
so we were finding the talent before. They were like, it wasn't Jay-Z now and Jay-Z in 2004 were two different Jay-Z's. He was still big and great, but it was different. There were different levels of like that celebrity. Beyond all the celebrities that were on the cover, they knew that one thing we really did well was events. We were marketing the hell out of this brand. So we were throwing parties and events. That's how we also really made the money. Yeah. Selling print ads were still hard then. So what we did is we packaged it up as like events. You're buying the ads, but really what you're getting is the events. So we started launching all the nightclubs in Vegas. We partnered with these amazing guys in Vegas.
So who was your client? It was the establishments that were your clients?
Well, liquor was a huge client of ours. The condo
for
development.
Events?
Yeah, for events. It was the liquor, car companies. We were super early on the whole DJ world. So, every one of these big DJs that you see now that's playing everywhere, they got their first article in 944. They were getting paid $200 or $100 to DJ for us at the time. No one was getting, forget $1 million, no one was getting hundreds of thousands of dollars. No one was getting $10,000. This is like, if you paid a DJ $2,000, he was like the man in the early 2000s. He or she. And, all these people were getting their articles. We were doing parties and tours and turning them into like celebrities in that regards. But the luxury brands wanted nothing to do with us. We tried so hard to get luxury to market with us. And they're like, you guys are a bunch of nightlife kids. We're never going to associate with the DJs and this like nightlife world. And my thesis was, right now you're seeing these girls wear like, BB and all this cheesy shit to the clubs, but soon they're going to be wearing luxury brands into the clubs, and you're going to really want that association because people buy the clothing not to sit in their closet, but to see and be seen. And we were like really at the forefront of all these events. If you were opening up a big place in Vegas or whatever market, we were doing the opening for you. In Miami, we were throwing the parties. We had the best parties on. You don't have it, but in Miami, there was a party at the Delano every Tuesday night, and it was like the hot place to be.
You were living in LA at the time, or New York?
I was LA and Miami. I was kind of back and forth at the time. But we found a way to create the brands to have integrations to these events at a time when before all this stuff happened. And I think, that's...
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Feel free to have a drink.
That was at a time when, Kim, like you talk about like the Parises and the Kims, and those Kim and like a lot of those celebrities were like, we launched liquor companies with them. They were like printed on the bottle. They walked in fashion shows for us. They were like they were coming to the parties and hanging out.
So that's how you met a lot of these celebrities.
Yeah, like the Britneys, the Lindsays, like all that whole world was partying.
I really want to understand 944 a little bit more because this was your first company. And the reason I want to dive into this a little bit is because, for the people who are listening to this who don't know where to start, don't know how to start, I want to kind of go back a little because like we've talked about the company. Obviously you had, massive scale. You said 150 people. You have all of these celebrities who are gracing the covers. You're running these events. You have all of these advertisers. And, I think it's kind of, to talk about the scale and to talk about the success is one thing, but I really want to understand. Are you able to talk about the sales dollars, the revenue dollars? Are you able to? Like, what were you doing? I guess at its peak, what were you doing annually?
Like 25 million, which was for a 25-year-old kid. Like a lot back then, those numbers were not like now you hear numbers and it's a lot different. But in 2002, 2005, those were big numbers for a startup, company.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I guess I'm trying to bridge the gap between you graduating school and what were the events that happened? Like where did you see this opportunity to start this? Like you talked about the pictures in Vegas and the clubs, and you started driving traffic that way. But I come from the media space as well. And to build this kind of infrastructure and to do everything you did, like how many years was 944 around?
Like 10 solid years. It was a fast move.
How long did it take you to scale to those kind of revenues? Like how many years?
Pretty fast. I mean, we started each year, like, I mean, in the first year we did like 200 grand, then it went to like the next year 500 grand, then it went to like $1 million. Then we had a big inflection point. It went from like 1 million to 4 million. And then 4, it went to like 12, and then it went to like 18, and it just started growing really quickly as we were adding markets and also getting really big deals. We started landing like $1 million liquor deals from single brands. Like we'd launched like Jose Cuervo Patino and La Familia and those brands. We were getting like $1 million a year.
You launched them by doing an event?
A series of, we were in all the key markets at the time. So if you were like Ciroc, we launched, Grey Goose, Patron, we were the first marketing group that really got behind the brand, but we opened it up in, that was, people then didn't know it was tequila. Tequila was, when we first started, like, there was a worm still in tequila at the bottom of the thing. There wasn't, Patron was like the first brand that ever came out to launch the tequila category.
Okay, so first things first. How did you what was the circumstances under you launched this company? So did you have a partner? How did you identify this as an opportunity, and how did you launch?
Yeah, there was early in, there was a guy that I was we were doing it with, and he got connected to me through another school, and we started in early on it, and I like literally took like my bar mitzvah money. Like literally, I went to my parents. I was still at Arizona. I actually went to Vegas, and I was staying a little bit longer. My parents.
So you were staying a little bit long in Vegas. You were part.
Yeah, I graduated in 4 years, which is a huge feat at Arizona State University. No one graduates in 4. And then I was going to Vegas a lot because there was this weird loophole at ASU. You can take cash advances out. And it gets billed to your tuition. So, I would like take these like $2,000 advances, and then every time semester was re-up, my parents were like, they just keep raising the rates at this school. It's crazy. I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I would take these, like, you could take like 3 clips a semester out. So like each semester I was taking like 6 grand, but then that was like, that was money then, and I was in Vegas, and my parents called me and they're like, I think you've outstayed. It's September now. Like you graduated. Like I think it's time to come home and get a job and get your ass together. So I remember I still have the airline tickets. I was going to fly home on September 10th. Then I moved it to September 12th. Then I moved it to 11th. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'll just come home. I flew home on September 10th. Mm-hmm. Wake up the next morning, September 11th, New York.
Oh, literally September 11th.
September 11th. And I'm like waking up like, what? I was 21.
Okay.
And I was 21. And I couldn't get in touch with my mom. I couldn't get in touch with my dad. I'm at the house. I'm like, I just left paradise with palm trees and beautiful girls. And now I'm just like, the fucking world's ending.
Yeah.
What am I doing? And I like packed up a truck. Like I packed up a U-Haul with whatever like random furniture my parents were willing to like get rid of from the house. And I was like, I'm taking whatever money I have built up, and I'm gonna go start this company. My parents knew I was like always like hustling something. I started.
Were your parents entrepreneurs?
No.
Really?
No. My dad worked in a schmata business, like private label dress shirts.
He worked for someone?
In a company. And my mom was a teacher at actually a Hebrew a yeshiva.
Okay. So, wow. Okay.
So
what did they think of you wanting to be an entrepreneur or taking that step? Like, what were your mom and dad's like first response when you said, I'm going to start a business?
Like, go for it. They knew I was uncontrollable. As a kid, I was like, it didn't matter. Whatever I wanted to do, I was like, I had that kind of like, there was this different drive at that age, for sure, that you're just like, I'm going to do what I want. I was working super young. I always was working.
Were they supportive of you being an entrepreneur?
Yeah. Yeah, because entrepreneur wasn't a thing then. It was not like something you did. It was like, wait, not like lawyer, doctor, like something, what do you mean you're just going to go start a business? But they knew it didn't matter. Like whatever, they knew I was going to like do it regardless.
Were they supporting you at the time?
Yeah.
I mean, financially.
I'm sure they helped me in some ways, but I think at that point I was like, I want to do this on my own. I had this like, I had this like kind of.
Okay, so let's get to the start. So with 944.
944. Other Toronto people can never get it right.
944. With 944, first of all, how'd you get the name? What was the significance of the name?
So the original name was actually wasn't called 944. We were working out of this design studio because that's how I didn't know anything about magazines. I looked up in this like book in Arizona. It said like the best design firms. I was like, start calling these companies. And there was one on 944 South Mill Avenue on ASU campus. I walked in. I'm like, hey, I want to start a magazine. And the guy was like, who is this like New York punk? Mm-hmm. I think I still had like 2 earrings in one ear, one in another. I was like, and we wound up partnering, and we literally started there. And the night before we were sending it to print, the designer was like, "What if we change the name to like Studio 944?" Because it was this like design studio on 944 Mill Avenue, and I was like open to it. I'm like, why don't we just get rid of the studio and just call it 944? And we created this cool logo on it, and we like changed the name like the night before we like, so the clients got this magazine that they thought was going to be called something else, because like I think it was called like On Point or something like.
Okay.
And that was kind of the. How
did you fund it?
With like a credit card. I took the bar mitzvah money, which was like maybe, I don't know, 15 grand at the time, and I took out like 10 credit cards and just maxed them the fuck out.
Sorry, you're telling me you built a $25 million business off of $15,000 of bar mitzvah money and like a couple of tens of thousands?
An incredible amount of cash flow management. Like we were always, in the beginning, we were writing checks we couldn't, fulfill for sure. Like, and it was, you learned every trick of the trade, how to manage every dollar of cash flow you can, like survival of like.
It was just you and the other founder? There was
one. Yeah, we had a couple co-founders at the time that like were like giving their blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, one thing I could tell you is, we didn't know what the fuck we were doing, but we had unbelievable heart. Like people bled for that company 7 days a week. This was in a time when like I was sleeping at the office.
How many employees did you have early on?
I mean, it was really let's call it like 8, but it was really the other guy's employees. It was his design studio that like all these designers, there's one designer, this guy Sid, who was like a nightlife guy, but a graphic designer in the day. We wound up becoming really buddies and just going out, and he became like, we were like planning the events and going out and meeting the people and selling ads. So we were working, in the day, and then at night we had to go and network and party. And my theory was like, you win the deal at night and you do the paperwork in the day.
Yeah.
Because there's like a bonding. You start drinking and partying with someone, and like you want to work with people. Like you want to build a community and want to work with those people. And we just built a huge following on that. We then started hiring like the hottest girls in every single city, and they were the sales team. And they would just go out and party with the decision makers at all these, and everyone knew they're like, fuck, the 944 team's coming to town. And when we came into a town, we came in like really aggressive, and we had it down to a formula. Like,
How did you learn along the way? I mean, you mentioned that nobody knew what they were doing, and I think in general, I mean, this wasn't. I think you almost created this industry. Like, I'm sure you had competitors at the time, but you mentioned you didn't know what you were doing. So how did you figure out along the way what you were doing? Like, is it just a constant trial and error iteration?
Yeah, total trial. I mean, we. Look, I had trouble reading, so try and read these books, but like it just never, I would just like stop after the first couple pages.
Yeah.
But you fucking just put in, we were working 7 days a week. There was no such thing as a day off. It was, I don't think I could do it now to that level. I mean, now it's different. I have the experience, so you wouldn't kill yourself like that. But, and you also at 20, you can.
At 20, you can do it.
You can recover a lot differently. But yeah, it was just trial and error. We made so many damn mistakes. I mean, there was so many things along the way, but people saw we had so much heart that like they almost felt bad. Like the magazine would come out in the beginning, it had like errors, spelling errors, all types of shit. But it was also something super new and unique. And we would design our own ads. We would design ads for liquor companies they would take like years to design. We would do it in like an hour.
How were you able to do that though?
I mean, literally take a camera, throw it on a table. It was a digital camera, and we're like, all right, let's do something with like, let's take the can of Heineken and let's put it next to like a disco ball and turn the lights down and just take a photo of it. And it was like, and we create some, we were probably drinking at the time. We're like, we'll come up with a cool tagline, and we're like, that was it, boom. And the Heineken like team at the time was like, oh my God, this is amazing and it's great, and we just go right then and there. Like eventually the brands were like, stop designing our ads because we have a design team and all that. But back then we were able to move so fast because we just didn't care about any rules.
Okay. Sorry, I got something in my eye. Yeah. Look, it's okay. I'm not fully understanding how this evolved. Like you're talking about it very nonchalantly, but it just sounds like it's just like this massive explosive growth. I'm just trying to understand how you controlled all of this. Like, how did you go, like the type of, the first few years you talked about, 200,000, 500,000, but when it started doing like, into the single digit millions, like, tens of millions, did you eventually bring on like a corporate CEO? Like, was it you the whole time?
No, I mean, look, that's some of the mistakes for sure. Like, I think, how do we control it? Clearly we didn't, because eventually it fucking went off the rails.
Okay.
But, I think you give any type of, at that time, like that much, that much money to where, again, entrepreneurship wasn't a thing then. Like, no one was like starting companies like that at that point. So I was the one where I was like, oh, all my other friends have all these jobs, they're making all this money. Like, I'm fucking like literally eating shit right now. I'm paying myself like nothing. Like, but I had all these perks because I could go out everywhere and eat for free and drink for free. And to me at 20, that's all I needed was like, an all expense paid lifestyle. But yeah, we there was definitely like we hired CFOs and teams, but I didn't know how to really run the team. I mean, hindsight, we probably should have hired a CEO, and I should have been like kind of the brand director or creative and just like gone out and continued partying. But it was hard because I would party at night, and that was a time when I was like really partying. And then you'd come into work and I was like a bit, all over the place and erratic.
How are you able to get things done considering you're out partying all night for the purpose
without this we built this accountability tech tool that was like, like what like an SAP or Oracle is. And everything was like, everything had checklists and systems and accountability. And, new client came in, 30 work tickets got created. I was obsessed about accountability and creating this like workflow system that, if we were a disorganized mess, the system would keep us together. And that's how, without that, there's no way that company would have gone.
Okay, so I think that's the important lesson here, is that simultaneously while you're out and you're partying, and when I say partying, I mean you're partying for the purpose of developing your business.
Yeah.
You're socializing, you're networking, but you're simultaneously creating this accountability tool through these systems. And that comes from your education in...
Yeah, I mean, that's what I learned from supply chain, was like all these processes and being able to get like, degrees of, making sure there's no degrees of failure. And like it ran our accounting system, finance, distribution, editorial, like all the content would be managed there. Like before CMS systems were like a thing. So we were building all that. There wasn't APIs or other tools. We had to build that line by line.
But your ability to, you didn't build them yourself. You hired people to build them.
Yeah, we hired developers.
But you still needed to have the knowledge and understanding on how to monitor the people who you were hiring to make sure that you don't get ripped off. Because I've developed technology too, and and by the way, with Dorsia, we're going to get into that in a bit. But with Dorsia, like it's complex. Like I've used your system,
incredibly complex,
and it works very well.
Thank you.
Yeah, and. My favorite thing is being able to just get up and leave at the end. But the technology that's involved in making that happen seamlessly, it's complex. But just getting back to what you were talking about. So your partying and networking and the things that you were able to do socially kind of fused with the education that you had in terms of creating systems and like those accountability tools. How important do you think the combination of those two things were in terms of, having to be able to have this company where there's the art and then there's the science you learned at school, and the art you just learned by executing and living life? Like, how important is this combination?
I mean, it's funny. I went through, I feel like it's my psychotherapy. Because one of these therapists I was talking to kind of brought out to like you wind up building all these like layers and things around you to compensate for your inability or inefficiency to like actually figure it out. So you build like tools and systems to like, so you don't have to do it, because there's obviously something that's getting in your way. But I don't know, I think learning, I originally, before I did supply chain, I did 1 year of CS, and like, you know, didn't really understand it. It was like PHP. I kind of like was understanding, but not really. I'm not a computer nerd, you know, but I was fascinated by tech. I was, you know, before college, I was like building my own computers, and like I had a little side hustle where I'd build computers for people and make some money. Like I was always fascinated by computers and tech. So I think building that system, I learned so much of how to work with developers, what you can build, like, you know, just operations and systems. And I knew that like I needed to have that in there, because that was going to be to scale this thing and move. And this was at a time where, you know, you didn't have, we had our AT&T bill was like $300,000 a month. And that was
you say your AT&T bill?
Yeah, like
your phone bill?
Like the internet you know of now. Like we had actual fiber lines that had to get installed from city to city to connect all these offices to deal with the size of the files, because it wasn't like, you know, 2 gig, or, you know, it wasn't, you know, it was, you know, a little bit over 56K.
What were these files that were so big?
The magazine files, to transfer them around from city to get all these photos, to get all this stuff, all the content.
Right. Wow. Okay.
Each magazine was say 200 pages, so you're developing 2,000 pages a month at really big files in old tech systems. We'd have to bring to send the magazine to print. There are many times, I mean, it's a real fucked up story, but we'd bring the actual computers, the old Mac big towers.
You'd bring them to the printing
Bring them to the printing press at like 2 in the morning.
Plug them in, and then
and plug them in and start like extracting stuff at a time.
And you were simultaneously scaling the digital side too, right? Because you knew that was.
And we were simultaneously doing it, and no one would print from the device, right? Everyone wanted to print to output to the old school way of doing it, but we knew we couldn't do it. There was one printer we found in like Phoenix, Arizona, that was printing, you know, like really cheap quality stuff and adult magazines. And it was the only guy, I met with him, I remember it was a husband and wife, immigrants, and he saw like our desire, and he just took me under my wing. I would spend every week, like every time at that printing press for days, learning everything. I like worked on the printing press, changed out the plates. I was like obsessed about knowing every process so I can figure out how to build this stuff. And, you know, spend too much time in a dirty, ugly printing press that anyone should do. I mean, now it's so digital and automated, but back then, like, it was huge, you know, massive files and big things of metal plating you're building, and it was a disaster.
Talk to me about W Magazine. So eventually, did you leave 944 to work?
So we sold. It went through like a bankruptcy reorganization. We exited out of the bankruptcy. We sold it to that other media company. We sold the software to the largest printer in the country. It wasn't that great of a story. I actually got fucked the whole way. I got like literally, you know, I worked my ass off and basically got left with nothing but debt. So that was I lost the company, sold the stuff, got all this like PG stuff, like stuff that was attached onto my name that I had to go through. And I was like, all right, I'm not gonna file personally. I'm just gonna like fight my way through it. Then started looking at other, the company that bought it, you know, had me in like a lockup for like a year or something. So I wasn't working, and I was in LA. I was just like doing yoga twice a day, brunching with, you know, different girls and stuff. And I was having an amazing time. But finally it's like, all right, summer camp's over. You know, what are you gonna do? I'm either gonna back your next deal or whatever. And I came up with 3 ideas. I presented to my original investor and to him. They shot down all 3 deals. One was an invite-only dating app, Raya. The next one was like a Groupon Guilt City type of thing, a promo thing. And then the other one was like ClassPass, because I was going to all these gyms and yoga things. I was like, oh, wouldn't it be great if you just...
Sorry, it was like ClassPass?
Yeah, ClassPass didn't exist then, but I was like, I want to create this thing where you can go to all these different gyms but pay one membership and have access. And I really wanted to do the invite-only dating app because I was really good at building community with 944. We built this amazing community. I thought, man, if there was just a way to harness everything I knew from that, but build this kind of like dating app that was more about the same way of getting into the best parties, but through that. And they're like, this is the dumbest idea ever.
Your investor said that.
Yeah, both sides, the guy who bought the company and then my investor.
Yeah.
And they're like, why don't you take this? They had an asset called Surface, which is this amazing design magazine. But I was like, they're like, why don't you take this? We'll contribute the asset into a thing. We'll give you some money. And why don't you rebuild this? You're great at magazines and building community, and design can have you can do this for forever. It's a really cool brand. I was like, what am I going to, this is not what I want to do. But they convinced me into it. And then I I really actually got into it. And I was like, all right, I'm going to take this brand that would put lamps and, things on the cover. And I was like, let me build a design community because.
But Surface Mag is like an architectural design.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
It was architecture, design, stuff like that. But I was focused more on the people that made the products and like all these craftsmen, and they were focused more on the products.
Yeah.
And I had this idea. I'm like, well, what if we just put, every single issue the same style. The cover is a different notable designer who made the product. Inside, you could put the lamp or the table or the car or whatever they designed, but build this kind of community around it. And we started right away with that and talks and events. And I took the same formulas I did with 944, but did it for the luxury and world, where I saw like, oh wow, the budgets were a lot better there. There was sophistication was better. I wanted out of nightlife big time, and this was like.
Why did you want out of nightlife so much?
I was just burnt. I think the whole company was burnt. I mean, the traveling from city to city, going out all the time. It eventually just wore on me. Like, it was like the same shit. How many like nightclub parties and It's the same thing. And this was like, sophistication and people looked at you different. And
did you see the same like level of opportunity? Because like with the nightlife publication, there's just a high volume of people, and there's a high volume of engagement, especially with younger people. This is, I'm assuming, a much kind of older, more sophisticated audience. Did it seem as big of an opportunity to you?
I mean, no. And then I also had like this like internal like gripe that like, wanting to make sure that it wasn't like a one-hit wonder kind of thing, that I really had to, that I had to do to make something and have a better exit. But I was like so aggressive, like, all right, I got to get back to a place where I could have like at least 10 million, 20 million a year in revenue, because this is going to be really hard to do all over again with like, the brand was on its deathbed. It was like Surface was literally, it was like 20 years old at the time.
And so your investors decided like they wanted you to revive it, is what you're saying.
Yeah. And I did. It's a really great brand. I never wound up selling it, but I started buying these other.
You're still a CEO of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I really love the brand. It's a great brand. I mean, it's now like 30 plus years old, and it stands for something, which is really cool. But I would buy I was looking for all these opportunities. We bought this company called Gen Art, which was like an emerging talent company back then. We bought it out of bankruptcy because I was like, my view was, 944 had all this value, but I was burnt as the founder of it at the time.
Yeah.
And, it sold for like pennies on the dollar. I'm like, there's got to be other brands like that are, so I found this brand in bankruptcy. I bought it and we fixed it up, turned it out, sold it. And I started doing that with a bunch of these brands, like just, buying these distressed assets for cheap, fixing them up and then flipping them out real quick.
You were doing that within Surface?
Yeah. Okay. Within the group, and then and a couple of them weren't fix and flips. A couple of them were fix and you get destroyed. We didn't know what we were doing. We bought a creative direction company and a graphic design house, and it was a really crazy cheap deal. But we had no idea what we were doing, and had to shut it down. There was
How did you sort of interrupt you? How did you get into W Magazine? Because W Magazine, you were the CEO.
That was the big one.
That was the big one. So tell me about that, because that was acquired by Condé Nast.
No, Condé Nast owned it.
Condé Nast owned it. Okay, my understanding was they acquired it, but Condé Nast owned it,
and
they brought you on board to, I guess, was it resurrected or was it already doing well?
They were the story is I built the next version of the tech for Surface that we're using, and the media companies were like, this was a more advanced version of the one that I had previously, and they're like, this thing is pretty cool. For a baby little boutique media brand, like why do they have this software that's like automated and efficient and creating all these like cool tech? Like we were doing what you probably needed like, 5 to 6 times the staff with just this really cool tool. So we were getting these bigger media companies' attention, and we were going to interview someone and to run all of our revenue. And in the interview, she's like, and she was at W, and she's like, you should buy W. She's like, you're the perfect person to buy this thing. I'm like, is it for sale? And she's like, it's about to be. It's under real duress. Kanye's about to put 3 products on the market. And it's going to be this like, system. You have to go in and like, build the plan and put, it's like almost like an auction. So I'm like, put me in, let me talk to the group. So I wound up talking to the bankers that were doing the deal, and I was obsessed. I was like, all right, here's a brand that's doing 30 million. It was in its heyday doing like 100. But I'm like, look, if I could somehow get this brand, I could get back and like start going on a big run again. Because I was in like a weird place in life. It was like, I didn't have the means and the tools and the size of the company or the team or anything. So I felt that was like, there was a bruise to my ego for sure, and like a little inadequate there. I was like, I have to get this fucking brand. I would crush this brand. I know exactly what to do with it.
So you ended up with your investors buying it?
So it was a crazy story. We went in for it to go for it, and I wound up getting some really big backing behind it. And we went in on that early in the process, and we're like, we'll take it. Went to the board. We're like, we'll take it. I think they were asking like 30 million or something. We're like, we'll take it cash, payment up front. And they're like, no, we're running a process. It has to go through the process. We're like, but how much is it for sale? And they're like, well, the target we want is 30. And that guy was like, great, done. We'll take it. And we had this plan of what we're going to do with it. It was Adam from WeWork. So it was like he was splashing money everywhere of what we're going to do with
Adam,
that brand.
the founder of WeWork.
Yeah, we were with his CEO.
Sorry, he was the investor?
He was going to be one of the backers of it. Yeah, he was one of the big backers of it
to
at
help
the
you
time.
Purchase. Okay.
Yeah, and at the time he was calling in remote. His CEO was there, and we were with this other really big developer who was a huge New York real estate developer who was the landlord for the first WeWork office. So the whole thing is I was working on a big project for WeWork at the time with Surface, and they caught attraction to what I was doing, so they were going to get behind this deal for W. And they said no, and and then WeWork's like, what do you mean? You want to sell for there? I'm saying yes, no, forget it. I'm lost interest. So then I lost him. Then I had to like go back in, and I went through this whole process to buy this asset that, at that point, it took me like a year and a half, 2 years to buy the asset. It was a disaster of all accounts. Meanwhile, I was so distracted trying to buy this asset that I wasn't focused on Surface, that Surface was declining.
Right.
And we were really running out of cash. But I was like so pregnant in this deal to buy W, and Kanye needed to figure out a solution too, because it was going further and further out, and every time the number kept dropping because I would bring in a different level investor, and they were like chopping in, and everyone else kept dropping out of the race because they didn't have like the patience to go with it. And I developed a good relationship with the people. I think the Kanye executive team is a really great team, but it went on for so long. Finally. And it's a much more, crazy stories with rabbis and all types of like luck happened.
So did you end up buying it?
Yeah, we wound up buying it at the last, like, I'm out of cash. Like, I'm literally talking to bankruptcy attorneys on the other end for Surface, because I'm like, fuck, and I'm like, I can't. For Surface? Yeah, I'm like, I can't believe I'm gonna have to fucking go through another, 10 years later, go through another fucking reorg.
Surface is still around, so you were able to dodge that.
Surface is still around, yeah. We dodged it, but because when we were doing the deal, there was this working cap. I don't want to get into all this stuff, but there was this like working capital adjustment that was as part of the deal, and I studied every ounce of that I don't know how much Adderall I took, but I took a lot and studied every square inch of that business of W.
Yeah.
I knew every financial from the first day. I knew every piece of data.
There was an adjustment that needed to be made on the balance sheet?
That needed to be made on the balance sheet, but it wasn't caught on the whole thing. And I kept looking, I was like, something's fucked up here. I'm like, I just got to get this thing.
What was it? What did you find?
It was an accounts receivable, like misreconciliation. And I was like, it was kind of the video game where you're driving the car and you see the end and you're running out of gas and you're like, if I could just get to the finish line, I get another 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I got to figure out some way to get this deal closed because it's the only thing that's going to get me back on track. And I had, all this stuff, banks and factoring people, because they had a lot of accounts receivable. So I was factoring on day one. I knew that if I could just get this thing to close, I had millions of dollars coming back into my control, and I could figure out a way to get back on track. So we did, and we figured out a really great transaction at the end. I got some extra money from the working capital adjustment. We factored it. I got the brand with not even seconds. I was so far past that point of it. But we got control of the brand. And I really, it was W was birthed out of Women's Wear Daily, and the W stood for women. And it was at a time when there was so much of this cultural movement going on. And I was looking, I was like, you know what? And I knew every single person, the whole 47-year history of that brand. And I was like, how in all this time has there never been a woman in charge of this magazine? It's a magazine for women.
So you put in the first female editor?
I put in the first female editor-in-chief.
Yeah.
This girl, Sarah Moonves, who they didn't originally want me to meet with her because I think they wanted to save her for a different project or something, but I finally pushed through. I wound up meeting with her. I met with the team. I didn't think anyone was really that great. I finally met with her, and I was like, first 10 minutes, I was like, you're the editor-in-chief. She's like, that wasn't what the intention of the meeting was. And I'm like, you're the exact person for it. She embodies the brand, and the brands wanted her as a customer. She knew she had incredible work integrity, and I thought she was going to be a great person to partner up with on the brand, and we did. I think it was a great move. I mean, I remember we were sitting with Anna Winter at the time before the deal. I was like, I want to put Sarah as editor-in-chief, be the first female editor. She's like, well, there's been female editors. She's like, no. She's like, there has to have been. They bought the brand 15 years ago from Penske. So sure enough, we're like, yeah, this is the right move. We had to get rid of the guy that was there, which was a whole problem. It was a lot of stuff.
What were you, okay, so my understanding is did you only hold on to that for a year and 3 months?
So we bought it, and the answer is yes, but that wasn't the original plan. We bought it, and there was a whole transition services agreement that was going on with it, and I was getting control of the print magazine first, and then the website second because of how it took to move it over. But they were managing part of it, and this was literally right before the last quarter, right before COVID. So I'm getting control of the website. I think February 15th or something, which was a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
COVID happens.
Yeah.
I'm like. And it was literally, we had a full floor in World Trade Center. That's where COVID outbroke in New York.
So how many employees were at W Magazine at the time that you purchased it?
80. I was back to combine 120 employees, but I had a lot more revenue and a better starting point. So I felt okay, I finally got back on track. COVID happens.
And what was the result of COVID happening?
It was a disaster. Print, everything seized. Everyone had to evacuate the office, and that's where we were based out of. Because that was ground zero. That's where... Yeah. The girls all went to Fashion Week, and they were calling us. They're like, something's going around in Europe right now. And we're like, oh no, what? And then they came back, and that's where the first cases started happening. So I had to try and remote control this brand. And I'm like, oh my God, how am I gonna do this all over again? This is crazy. I'm like, how do I keep getting myself into these situations?
You're not getting yourself into the situation. These are circumstances.
Circumstances, sure. But, at a certain time, I worked so hard to get the deal. So I was like, all right, I had this 5-year plan. I was ready to go. And then this happened. I'm like, I can't believe this. I literally, I remember that when I finally signed the deal, I went out to dinner with Ed and this other couple, really good friends of ours. And we were at Pastis in New York. And I must have been on pure adrenaline at the time because I wasn't sleeping. She would wake up, the whole bed was drenched. I was sweating out profusely, like every night for months and months. And we go out to dinner, and I'm like, I don't know, maybe halfway into it, I'm like, I'm gonna go outside and just get some fresh air for a second. I left my phone there, which is odd because I always take my phone everywhere. Just go outside, and I walk outside, and I turn the corner in meatpacking, and I see these couple of steps. I'm like, it's a good place. Just fall down. That was it. Just completely passed out. You know, I was basically sober. I was like, literally, I was just fucking done.
You were just, I mean, it was the stress, right? It was the stress of the situation.
Stress, the exhaustion. I think I was just mentally done. Like I used every reserve tank I had, and I just was done. I was toast. And so they're like, you know, in the middle of dinner, they're like, hey, is he still in the bathroom? What's going on? They can't find me. They're calling the phone's ringing on the table. They're like, what is going on? So they're going around calling my name and meatpacking, and like, I guess like 45 minutes later, like I kind of like wake up a little bit, and they see me in this like stoop, and they're like, oh my God, like what is wrong? Like you've really like, you pushed it too far at this point. But then I was like, all right, I got this brand. I'm like, I wound up waking up the next day with all this energy.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, I'm gonna like go back on this big run. And it was really tough again to go through that whole thing all over again. And I was like, you know what? We were already having some friction internally because I wanted to do a lot of stuff with the brand, digitally, experientially, more like create a show on Netflix and other stuff. And they were really hell-bent on print being a lot of the future. And
they being your investors?
No, the team at W. We were having some friction, and I also, you know, the biggest learning lesson I made with 944 was when the economy collapsed. We were such a cool, vibey company at the time. I didn't want to screw the cool, so I took all the cash we had, and I just kept the facade going, even during the financial climate. I didn't want to like, you know, change anything. And then eventually we had to, and we watched the culture of the company get crushed at 944. But I burned through millions and millions of dollars to try and keep up the appearance that like everything's good, the world's ending, but everything's good with us.
So you eventually turned things around at W, didn't you?
So yeah, well, what happened is when initially we cleaned it up. We got like, even in that first, like before COVID, the print side, we cleaned it up, cleaned the art direction. We launched the podcast. We were starting to move. I was really aggressive. And then all of a sudden the COVID stuff happened, and I was like, you know what? I remember I had a management team. I was already developing a lot of friction with the team because I was like, this is going to be a real problem, this COVID thing.
Let me ask you something. Was the team at W, when you were having all this friction and then you got COVID on top, was it mostly a female team?
No.
Okay.
No, but there was a lot of females. But
do you feel there was resentment because, you know, you came in, you bought it, you're all of a sudden the CEO of this company?
For sure. I mean, look, I say the brand was about to get shut down. Like the truth is, they were going to shut it down. It was done. Like, you know, I did save this 47-year brand, and I don't think that team ever understood that part, that like I really went to bat and PG'd and put a lot on the line to like save this brand. Mm-hmm. But when COVID happened, I was like, this is going to be a real problem. We're going into emergency control right now. And like, you're overreacting. This is going to be nothing. It's going to be over in 4 weeks. Like, don't do this. You're going to kill the company. I'm like, I've gone down this road before. I promise you, if we don't go into emergency crisis mode right now, the company will die. Because like, so I did it, and that's when everyone hated. Like, I was like public enemy number one, and that's when the press started coming out.
Did you have to let go of a lot of people who were?
We furloughed a lot of people. Yeah.
No, but did you let go of a lot of people because of the friction that you were having with certain individuals, like whether it was management or, you know, various levels of management, because they didn't see eye to eye with you, the new owner?
No, and I probably, you know, if I redid this decision all over again, I mean, they were the ones really holding. They were the ones that had control of the editorial and the brand and the marketing, and I was really kind of, you know, on the business side. So, you know, I knew if I kind of got rid of them, that would have been a real problem. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I was fine being the enemy, because I was like, if I don't, this brand's going to die on my shoulders. And the last thing I want to do is being this like custodian of this brand, is this like 47-year-old brand I just saved, fucking die a year later what would be the...
Were you getting a lot of pressure from your investors? So, I mean, they had just put up a meaningful amount of money to back you on this purchase.
So the truth is, no, I didn't have investors. Everyone dropped out. This took like so long. Every investor dropped out. I did it on my own.
So you put up your own $30 million?
No, at the time, by a year and a half later, the price dropped substantially.
Okay, so you bought it yourself without any investors?
Yeah.
So you truly were like fully the owner? You were?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I was fully... I like leveraged a lot on the whole situation.
But you sold W Magazine eventually.
We sold it during COVID to this really great to Bustle, which is a female-focused like media company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so to Brian.
And you did well on the sale.
We did okay. I didn't. If you take in the 3 years of pain and suffering and everything like that.
But you sold it for more than you bought it for.
I sold it for more than I bought it for. Yes, but. It still wasn't it wasn't a win in my books by any means, but I saved the brand. I was able to walk away from the brand. I was already having back into the sweats all over again, and I was able to get out of the thing, and I wanted I wanted out of print, I wanted out of media, I wanted out.
So everything that you talked about just now that happened with W Magazine, it happened while you were still CEO of Surface.
Yeah, I was managing both.
So you're running both companies.
We moved into the same office. We merged the cultures, and that was also.
There's a different set of ownership. Like there's different people on the cap table for those two companies.
Yeah.
So
there was different people that owned Surface and
then you owned.
We kind of all merged it together again, and then it was just then COVID happened and everything turned into a spiral disaster. But
how were you able to run both? So how many employees did you have, let's say, at W, and how many did you have at Surface?
There was Surface there at its good point had almost 35, 40 people.
Okay. And
then it dropped down all the way to 15 through the end of this W thing, because we were hemorrhaging cash. And then with W there was, I don't remember, maybe 80 or something, or 90.
Okay.
And then we underestimated the merging of cultures. I thought because they both work with luxury, they both work with design, they both are kind of W was the fashion and cool kid, and Surface was the cool design brand. It was all right, these two brands, everyone should kind of play nice in the sandbox, and it didn't.
Let me ask you something. You started creative companies. I mean, they're essentially creative companies. Obviously, there's multiple layers of technology, and you have to have a keen understanding of data and analytics and finance and everything. But essentially, these assets are fueled by creative people, right? Largely by creative people. So how do you find, is it challenging for you to work with creative people who don't see eye to eye to you? And you're the owner of the company, and
that's why I left and wanted to go into tech, because I looked at it, I was this is, there was this guy Bob who's one of the early partners with Dorsia with me. We always spoke, I knew him for 20 some odd years. We were really close, and we'd always talk about business ideas and wanting to get into business together. And he would always go to me, he's what the hell are you doing? You have this network that's one of the best out there. He's and you're screwing around with these media companies that have no future. And no one wants to really get behind a media company. If you just took your talent and shifted it to tech, you'd be able to raise a shit ton of money. You'd be happier, and how to build tech. You have this rare thing. You have an amazing network.
Yep.
You understand luxury and community building, and you also know how to how to sell and do this other stuff. They're if you just switch your role, man, he's it will be such a different outcome. And that always stuck with me, and he always was in my ear. He's just get the hell out of media. And a lot of these people that were mentoring me were constantly also saying dude, you're just in the wrong industry. You really are. It's great that you're doing this stuff, but there's no real future in it. And I was getting to a point where I was 40. I was shit, I get to, a kid, as other stuff. I'm I can't just I got to figure it out.
Yeah.
So I was you know what? I was all right, this might be my last opportunity to do one more startup where I could just put it all on the line.
Is that Dorsia?
Yeah.
I understand now kind of the road from hospitality, technology, media. I mean, there are a lot of different things at play here throughout your career. And with Dorsia, I want to talk about Dorsia just anecdotally a little bit before we jump into it. So it's interesting because, you know, as I was talking at the beginning of this podcast, it's like, when you told me about this, I thought the idea was genius.
I remember the conversation.
Yeah, I was just concerned. I didn't look. You and I had just met. I didn't want to tell you like I'm really concerned about the execution on this. But at the time that I was thinking that, I certainly didn't. I knew you had this background in media. I certainly didn't understand what you had just told me now in terms of the extensive experience with developing technology and building teams and managing, like, you know, at some points hundreds of people and tens of millions of dollars in revenue. So I didn't know that about you. Yeah. So again, I thought the idea was genius, but I was concerned about the execution. But that being said, you know, after you launched it, maybe 6 to 8 months after you and I had met and you know, from this conversation, I was finding that just socially when I was out, people were like, you know, I really want to go to this restaurant. Gary, do you have Dorsia? And I kept being, do you have Dorsia? Do you have Dorsia? And I was like proud. I'm like, I actually know Marc. I know, you know, I know the founder. I know the guy who came up with it and who did it. And they're like, and then the next question I always found, and I found this fascinating. The next thing that they said to me, they said, can you get me on it? Do you have a connection to get me on it? Because it was by invite only. Yeah. And I don't know if is it still by invite only? Yeah. Okay. So I remember when I submitted to get on the app, because everybody was telling me about the app and you can get into restaurants that are really impossible to get into. And I remember applying for it, and then I sent you a text and I'm like, hey Marc, I just, you know, and then you right away just like, which was great. And I think I sent you 1 or 2 people, maybe a little more than that, over the last little while to say, you know, can you let these guys in too? And so I just find over and over again, and it's fascinating to hear just, you know, people that I know that don't know you, that aren't in the same social circles as you and I, that are talking to me about this. And I remember actually a good friend of mine, he invited me out to dinner, myself and Valeria, and it was to Dirty French here in Miami. Yeah. And they invited me, and he said, yeah, like, I go, how'd you get in? He goes, oh, this is Dorsia. I go, you know Marc? He goes, who's Marc? Right? So obviously, like, the speed at which you were able to penetrate this market is fascinating to me. And now really the pieces of the puzzle are coming together, like your ability to build community, your marketing ability, you know, everything that you do with content. And then I started really looking into it. And that was the genesis of me inviting you on this podcast, because I understood from that moment you and I met and you had told me about this conceptually and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I remember Eden was, she was criticizing the name. I remember you told me the name Dorsia, which was it was the restaurant that was really hard to get into in the movie American Psycho. Yeah. And I remember her saying to you at dinner, it was Yumi, Valeria, and Eden, and she was saying, Marc, no one's going to know this reference, but you've been able to brand this name so well. Like, it took me maybe 1 or 2 times that I couldn't remember it, but now it's like now I know it, and it's really easy to remember. So anyway, so I remember, so we went to Dirty French, and, you know, my buddy had told me that, oh, you know, I'm taking care of the bill, don't worry about it, I got it. And I said, what do you mean you got it? Like, he goes, we can just leave. And I said, what do you mean we can just leave? We can't just leave. He goes, yeah, we can just leave. But he was being a bit of a show off because he was trying to show me how cool he was, that he could just leave a restaurant. I go, how can you leave? He goes, well, it's Dorsia. I go, so we can just leave? He goes, yeah. I go, we can just get up and go? She goes, yeah, everything's done. I already paid for everything through the app before I got here. And even people who come in from out of town, like I have buddies who come in from Toronto. Yeah. Actually, Valeria's brother, my brother-in-law, he had never heard, he doesn't know anything about it. He's like a hotshot lawyer in Toronto. And he came down, he goes, oh, I want to go to this restaurant. He wanted to go to Carbone. Yeah. He's like, I want to go to Carbone. Gary, can you get me in? And I was like, well, I can't. There's only one way. You know what he said to me? He goes, is it Dorsia? This guy is from Toronto. He goes, is it Dorsia? I go like, yeah, how do you know Dorsia? Because I know he doesn't know you. Yeah. Like, I know he doesn't know you. You've never met him. You will. You'll meet him. He's a good guy. So in any case, so look, you've been able to do all of this. Talk to me about kind of the genesis of this, how this got started. First of all, tell me the premise of it, because I've already said it from what I've read, but I want you to say, tell me the premise of it.
Well, I mean, I think it started where I wanted to build some type of invite-only community. Like digital, I was always like, all right, digital, the best part of digital is the ability to be laser focused, and everything with digital was like, just like wide, how many impressions, how many followers, how much everything. And I was like, I want to do the complete opposite of that, which was always kind of like a thing in my different projects I was working on. And, you know, dinners to me was like, I loved going out to dinner. I viewed dinner as the new nightlife. And it was always a pain in the ass. And, you know, no matter what it is, always people calling me, can you help me get in here? And I hate doing it in general, you know, and even for me, if I want to go out, or the anxiety where like Eden would be like, hey, you know, there's this, you know, let's go here. And I would have this anxiety. I'm like, fuck, why'd she say that place? Now I got to sit there and try and figure out a way to get in.
Who do you know? How do you know?
How to do? And you're texting email. I'm like, this is so crazy. I'm like, and I'm going to like, you know, I'm like a good customer that like, I'm going to drink, I'm going to spend money, I'm going to buy the nice stuff. I'm going to, you know, like they want me in the restaurant.
But how do they identify you before you get there? Hence.
Yeah. And so I would talk to the owners, and a lot of it was right during COVID. Everyone was coming down to Miami, and the places were like impossible to get into. I mean, it was like here in Dubai were the only places open. And I would talk to some of the owners and I'm like, you got to be printing cash right now. And they're like, yeah, it's so busy, you know. I was like, yeah, but like double, triple, quadruple your numbers. And they're like, the truth is, it's the same numbers, but we're just really busy. Like a lot, tons of demand. And I was like, and then the light bulb went up. I'm like, oh my God, this is like 2000 all over again. When like bottle service, when that started coming out, and we started doing bottle of Absolute for, you know, $75 a person or $100, and 2 for $150, and then it went to $300 minimums, and then $500 minimums, and the front of the club wound up becoming like the real estate transaction where you can, you know, the table next to the DJ booth was $2,000, the other table was $500, and I watched how that totally changed nightlife completely, and that's where I was like, oh my God, it's nightlife pricing for restaurants. These restaurants have an insane amount of demand. It's like, you know, so many people outside of the club trying to get in, but no way to monetize the situation. And the restaurants had no technology or ability to do it. And the you know, the person at the front desk, you know, some guy would call and be like, I'm going to spend a lot of money. And they're like, I'm making $15 an hour. It's not going to change my life. Yeah. No matter how much you spend or not, like, sorry, I don't have a table. And there was no way to break through the line. And the restaurants didn't want to be the ones like setting the pricing and anything like that, but they knew that they needed to make more money because there was so much demand. The servers, it was hard to keep service staff in. Servers weren't making enough money. Running a restaurant is very difficult. I mean, it's not like, you know, every business is difficult. That one's really difficult. There's so much on the moment decision making that happens in real time. There's a lot of stuff that happens, and not all the, you know, there's only one Carbone, right? Not all of them are that like kind of unicorn type system. And, you know, a lot of these restaurants put in a ton of work, they bust their butt, and they don't make enough money. And the reason isn't because of anything other than there's no optimization tool. You know, I looked at it, I was like, oh God, that's the invite-only network. If you know, every one of these people are dying to get into these restaurants, and it's typically really good quality people that want to go to these restaurants. If I make the hook, if I could get the access to all these great reservations, I could build this network and everyone would want to be part of this like network. And then from there I could, you know, kind of launch a bunch of other products and experiences off it, but I needed some hook. So I wound up, you know, like Simon from Coat was one of my first like partners. And then we went to all the different guys in town and you know, we started getting a lot of these people to be really intrigued by it. I'm like, look, I'm going to build the first product. I'll build the tech. We'll fund it. We'll get off the ground. Like, I need you to like, trust me that like, we're going to fix the problem. And they're like, look, if you fix my Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, 5 p.m. problem, you do whatever you want. Just don't touch my Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That's perfect. That's great. And I was like, I'm like, these guys, I went through the numbers and I like found that like hook in their numbers. I found the same thing I found over like with the W or something else. There was like some magical moment there. I was like, my God, their problems are Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 8 p.m. It's not, the problem isn't Sunday, Monday, Tuesday at 5 p.m.
Because that's empty. They're saying, I don't have any revenue there, so put revenue in those kind of.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't want to be a promoter trying to fill your empty slots. Right. But I realized that their Sunday, Monday, their current customer at Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 8 p.m. was really their Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, 5 p.m. customer. And they were just coming in there, getting the best slots, spending the least amount of money. And when you looked at all the numbers, you were like, wait a second, your best slots equate to very low spends.
Yeah.
And now you have all these guys and girls trying to get in, willing to spend lots of money, but all the best spots were taken by people not spending money. Or they're coming in and TikToking their meal, getting a salad. They came in from out of town. Like, they would have TikToked on Monday at 5 p.m. They didn't need Saturday at 8 p.m.
Right.
So I was like, let me show you how I'm gonna like change that in there. And as we were doing that, I was also always obsessed with Uber. When the first time you got out of the car, that magic moment when you just got up and left, you're like, as simple as it is, that friction of paying and the taxi guy talking to you and the whole thing. Getting in the car was one thing, leaving without paying was a whole other. And I was like, as we started building the tech, I was watching all these QR codes that were happening with COVID about like trying to pay your bill or see the menu. And I'm like, that's really a shitty experience. Like to go to these restaurants and like rip out your phone and QR codes. I'm like, that's fine for like Fridays or McDonald's, but that's not really like luxury or hospitality. I was like, it should just be where you just get up and leave, just like Uber. There is no check. And everyone's like, that's impossible. There's no way to do that. Actually, you need some way for the customer to tell you where they're sitting and recognize, and they have to put some input in. You can't just magically know where they're sitting. And I'm like, I think you can. I started thinking about like tech and how the systems work and the POS systems and reservations. I was like, actually, I'm certain you can. And I was like, and I figured out a way to build it. Where I was like, we can find out where people are sitting without them telling us. And that was like the crux of just getting up and leaving. I'm like, and if you give that power to someone where like that part of the process, like that annoying, hey, can I get the check? Right. And the waiting and the back and forth and the weirdness and, the server doesn't want to deal.
How does the restaurant know to let you go?
Does the restaurant know to let you go?
Yeah, how does the restaurant know it's okay for you to leave? But let me give some additional context because I want to make sure we cover it off. The whole premise is that if there's a restaurant like a Carbone or like a Dirty French that's just difficult to get into simply because it's all booked up, right? Mm-hmm. I can go in and let's say I want to go in at 8 p.m. with 4 people, and I can purchase for X amount of dollars. This is what it costs. I can buy it. I prepay it, and I have that credit at the restaurant. Yeah. If I spend under that, it is what it is. I leave, the rest considered gratuity for the restaurant. If I spend over that, the app auto bills me because they enter that information in at the restaurant. Yep. That's the premise, right?
Yeah. So it started with that minimum spend where you're committing to that spend. It's exactly how you said it. We're launching all this new stuff right now where it's way more dynamic priced. We're launching a product with LVMH in October, which is by the bottle. So there's no more minimum spend. It's just like you're buying a bottle of Dom Perignon, or it's like you can buy like a...
Mark, again, you say it very casually, we're doing something with LVMH. This isn't easy. Like to get to the people at LVMH who are making these decisions, like you don't have to tell me anything proprietary, but are you just picking up the phone saying, hey guys, we got this thing? Like it sounds like it's a long kind of a sales cycle to get to a deal like this.
That was the benefit of Surface and W. I've worked with the brands, they were clients of mine. So like we had enough, Delphine Arnault was on the cover of Surface. So there was a lot of relationship building, and that's why everyone was like, look, you have this amazing network. You've done all these events and put all these people on the cover, and people tried to get into all these events over the years, and you have this amazing Rolodex. You can really leverage it the right way. LVMH is an amazing company. It's very hard to work with them for sure, for reasons, But the technology that we're building, I think they understood, wait a second, not only are you getting people access to not even now, it's not even just the hardest to get places. There's a lot of great places on there that are annoying to book, but also people don't want to deal with the friction of trying to get the reservation. They also, with Dorsia, you're getting the best table in the house. So part of it was like that whole premise of we're like the premium service to book, and the other stuff is kind of more like the hotels tonight where you're just going to get like the remnant stuff. So we're taking the best inventory, we're taking the best placement, the best servers, because they know that they're going to get paid more because it's already pre-configured and you're going to spend a bit more. It's kind of like when you're pre-committing, it's like that Vegas money. You're like, hey, you know what? We already said we're going to spend like a few $100. Like, let's get the nicer bottle of wine or whatever.
You're signing up a lot of restaurants. When I went to your website and your list of restaurants in the various cities that you're in, you've got probably collectively, if I counted correctly, just under 200 restaurants already signed up, and you seem to be signing them up at a pretty good clip. Yeah. That sounds difficult to me. Like I said, I had a restaurant director. It was a local director in Toronto back in the early 2000s, but it was hard signing people up. Like how are you signing them up at such scale?
I think a few things. One, I took the learnings of the last 20 some odd years, right? And we built really, look, one thing I was able to figure out is that I never knew in media is, really good talent isn't going to work for media companies unless you're a trust fund kid. Those really, you're either getting adequate talent or trust fund kids.
Okay.
In tech, you're getting the best of the best. And I saw what happened when he started bringing on these people. I was like, wow, these are like really competent people compared to some of the other people that I was used to dealing with. And we built like best in class tech, and like all the stuff we're building and the product offerings, like we're able to build it at, I felt like I was always one hand tied behind my back, and now I'm like kind of letting loose and, able to use all the experience to build it. But yeah, it's really top-notch tech. The value proposition is really strong for a restaurant. Like
they're not out of pocket at all.
They're not out of pocket. We're bringing them more money, and they're turning their tables faster because there's no more check. That's 15 minutes of dead waste at a restaurant.
Okay, so here's the other question I have for you. And again, if it's proprietary, feel free to tell me it's proprietary, but how do all the people know about it? How do the consumers already know about it? Like, I haven't seen a single ad for Dorsia.
We don't do any paid digital marketing or anything like that.
Not only that, but you cap it. Like, you don't allow people to sign up for it. You have to get on a list to get on it. So, I mean, what you've done or what you're doing, it's elusive. Like, to be able to have a product or like to have a service in this case that not everybody can sign up for. You can't. It's not even open. Yeah. Like, you have to have it. I had to text you to get access to it. But everybody I talk to knows about it, and when I tell them, I have, like, I'm on it, they're like, oh really, you're on it? Can you? I have people calling me asking me if they can wire me, if they can, like, send me a Zelle to go to my Dorsia and book them a table at a restaurant. Like, how are you able to generate this type of consumer excitement and engagement? And again, this is you and I met less than a year ago, and you're doing this. So I'd like to understand how you do it.
I mean, for one, I think, well, thank you for that. I think, I know, look, if you have the supply, right, that no one can get, it's like, it's no different than if I had the supply of Birkin bags right now. Every, top of the pyramid person would be knocking down my door to get in. So like in that regards, these hard to get in places is some form of currency, right? You're getting people access to something that is a real pain point for them. And something that, it really shouldn't be, because it's not even that expensive to go to restaurants, and you're going to be wearing watches and handbags and all this jewelry and other stuff to go there, but the actual dining experience isn't the expensive part. But it's a real pain point. So for me, it was like, if you get the supply and you start with this really great network, it will spread on its own, because people want, like I remember even with Uber early days, that was when someone would come in from that town, like, oh, can you help me with this thing? I'm like, just use Uber, man. What are you doing? Like, stop. And I wanted to create that vibe where people were just like, wait, why don't you just go on Dorsia and book it? Like, why are you going through all this pain? And we started with this really small database of really top quality people. And my thesis was, if you build a really good supply network, those people will start nominating other people, and like kind of your NPS score would go up, because
tell the people what NPS score means.
Net Promoter Score.
Yeah.
And I viewed it as like, if we paid them, if we gave you like $50 for each person you nominated, you would lose the desire to want to, kind of, and desire and demand are two things you got to really kind of watch that balance with. And my view the whole time was, if someone asked me to help them, I'm like down. I'm really down to help. When they ask me, they're like, hey, I'll give you $100 if you do that, I'm like allergic to it. Like, I don't want to do that. So I was like, okay, there's got to be a way, like, if you give people the cool card, to let them pass on the cool card, like, hey, I could help you get into this thing. Here, let me send you an invite. It would, the kind of like, the community would do the job. Like, they would do what they're supposed to do, which is like the power of like wanting to help people and solve solutions for people. And I think a lot of that is maybe from like, the hospitality side. Maybe it's like a mix between kind of like the Burning Man-esque and the hospitality convergence between the two. But a community is really there to like help each other. And like this community of people that are going to these places and this top of funnel pyramid, like our database is pretty insane. Probably one of the like
how many registered users do you have now? I mean, that you've allowed in.
There's 75,000 people have applied so far. We've let in about 50, a little over 50,000.
How do you decide who to let in?
Now we're doing a bit more tech. But originally it was like we had like a membership committee, and they're reviewing every application, and
Sorry, I'm not talking about the restaurants. I'm talking about the users.
Yeah, the users. There's like a membership team there.
Do you look at their Instagram? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, there's a few people on the team. They do the Google search, Instagram, everything, LinkedIn, see what types of parties they go to, where they go, who they're associated with,
like what they do for a living potentially.
Yeah, and then but part of it is because we also want to build this really great database. Like the restaurant reservation is like the first hook of it, but there's a lot of other things we're looking to build, and we knew having this really great database would be super valuable and important.
Let me ask you: are there? I mean, I'm sure you've done your research. I'd be curious to see what the numbers look like in terms of the amount of restaurants that are so hard to get into, because there are
around the globe thousands and thousands.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah. Because like in Miami, I could probably off the top of my head, like if I really have to think about it, it's probably about maybe 15, just in the one city. But that's also because I'm not in the.
But also, taste is subjective. The places you want to go to are different than the place that someone else wants to go to.
That's true.
You're mentioning Carbone, but like a lot of people are which is great. They run a great product. But a lot of people would rather go to Tao than Carbone, and you'd be like, I don't want to go to Tao, I want to go to Carbone. The other person's like, I don't want to go to Carbone, I want to go to Tao.
But Tao also has the same demand and limited amount of inventory.
Right? I mean, they're a machine. They're a machine. I mean, we're actually launching, which we haven't even announced, so you're gonna get. We're launching in Vegas for F1. They're turning over 100% of all their inventory to Dorsia, and it's going to be all for all their venues, and it's going to be the first, it's the #1 grossing restaurant in the world. I mean, they're insane. What happens when you take the highest grossing restaurant, put our pricing technology in place and our payments technology in place, and what does that do for like one of the busiest weekends of the year? So
you're talking about the future of Dorsia. Where do you go from here? What are your kind of short and long-term plans?
Well, with the bottle technology, like obviously the natural evolution is to launch day clubs and nightclubs, because our payments tech, which SplitPay comes out actually today, is best in class. Like no one has our frictionless payments tech, but no one has this SplitPay technology. And SplitPay is incredibly complex. Like, we have the backers and advisors from the Airbnbs and Live Nation and Ticketmaster and all these people helping advise us, and they've all said, do not do SplitPay. It's impossible. We've tried it. It's so hard. And you don't think about like how hard is it to split a payment, but it's actually really, really difficult. You can't split your concert tickets or your Airbnb or your hotel room like Marriott. No one lets you SplitPay. It's really, really challenging, which is why we wanted to do it. But it's for nightlife and day life, especially with dinners, everyone gets up at the same time. So it's annoying to deal with the split pays and the weird credit cards and the awkwardness but there's an inconspicuous way to do it, how we're doing it. With day clubs and nightclubs, everyone gets up at different times. There's a shit ton of anxiety. Whoever's left last is holding, and the bill is like 20 grand, not $300. So that technology where you can book the tables, and have all the payments done in advance. That's one part. The part we're really focusing on right now is going to be the front of house experience. Like I'm really you have like a brand like LVMH that's coming really big into hospitality. They're opening up restaurants, lounges, everything. They're going aggressive. So all the luxury brands are coming into hospitality because they realize that the customer's there wearing the bags, wearing the shoes, doing that. Like they might as well capture them too. And like a Dior Cafe or Hermes, brunch spot is going to be a heavy popular place. My view is, when you walk into the restaurant, they should be like, hey, Gary, nice to see you. Your table is over here. You never told them your name, just like the Uber driver sees you on the map getting closer. But where on the Uber, they're telling you, okay, how do you like your air conditioning? Do you want me to talk or not talk in the car? We're doing it based on, where's the anxiety when you get to a restaurant? It's typically when you sit down waiting to get your first drink. You want that drink right away, and then getting the server to come, and there's all this tension. So we're doing where, hey Gary, your table's over there, and as you get to the table, your first drink is already on there. Because you told us in advance, I wanted Dirty Hendrix Martini.
Right.
Very cool.
When you purchased on Dorsia before you even went.
Yep.
You're going to start offering those options.
Yeah, all the options. Yeah.
You know what I really like about your service. I mean, I like it overall, but what I like about it from an industry perspective is that there's always been in the nightlife industry and in the hospitality, like restaurants in general, there's this like layer there's this like ambiguous layer in between the consumer and the establishment where it's a popularity contest. It's like who you know.
Yeah.
It's like all of this, and it gets so convoluted, and it's really difficult, and it turns off. And to your point earlier, it turns off like good customers who are actually, they're not so price sensitive.
Yeah.
They're just people who you want in there. If you're an establishment that wants a certain type of person in there to, for the image of their establishment. So it's just been this like manual process. You don't know. It's all about friends and stuff. But what you've done is you've applied this layer of technology in between the customer and the establishment. And you've brought it down to really its fundamental point where it's like, hey, like if you commit to this price point, then it's almost like a self-qualifying thing. And then on top of that, you're not letting, it's interesting because you haven't opened it up to everybody. And I didn't understand until this conversation why you didn't open it up to everybody. But you didn't open it up to everybody because you're screening people. So it's not enough just to have that X amount of dollars per seat. You kind of have to be cool. Like you have to go through the Dorsia team to make sure that like you're cool. Like you're not you're not a creep. You're not a jerk, right? Right?
100%. We want to make sure that because hospitality is like you're letting. My view is like the restaurant's lost control of the dining room, and part of what makes a restaurant really cool is like the people that are there and the vibe and all that, and getting it back to where you can make sure a certain amount of like fashion people, you need the bankers, you need all the different people there to create the vibe. One part of it was that. The other part of it, honestly, was we knew that putting all that supply into the market, there was a liquidity balance that needed to occur, and too many users and not enough inventory would be a real problem, and not enough users and too much inventory would be a problem. So we were like throttling it to figure out, okay, how many members can each place, and then we had to prove the model because the restaurants weren't going to be like, hey, take everything we got on day one. They're like, show us that this thing really works. So we're like, okay, based on how much inventory we're getting, here's how many people we can let in, and keep playing with those numbers until we proved to the market that like, this was the future, and it's never going to go back. That we know.
When I think about this, I really do think of the evolution of, let's say, for example, the database, and I'm sure that you're taking, this is part of your plan, where you have this database. You mentioned it's 50,000 people. You've rejected 25,000. You had 75,000 applicants, 25,000 you've either rejected, they're on hold, 50,000 you let in. As that number continues to grow, you're growing this massive database, which eventually will be in the millions of people, of approved people who have come in, and now they're in this network. I mean, there's so much that you can do from there in terms of like your events, maybe your own venues, your own restaurants. But there's the whole social aspect of it. There's a dating component to it. So it could become almost like an everything app around this cohort of human beings that are hand selected, by your team, and also have proven themselves that they're purchasing. And then you have the data of their purchasing patterns and kind of where their thresholds are in terms of what they're able to buy, the frequency of which they go out. So I think all of this data aggregation is going to lead to so many more things.
Totally.
And I'm happy that I was there early on, but before you launched, just to witness it, it's really been fascinating to see it progressed. So look, I mean, I remember there was one other thing I wanted to chat with you about, because you and I talked about this off camera, and I wanted to ask you about it. Tell me the story with Kanye West.
Oh, God. Kanye. Look, I worked with Kanye for many years. Like I said, the relationship with the Kardashians has been going on for a while. I was on that show, so it's been.
So you were on the show?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was on the show, and.
You had mentioned to me that Kim and Courtney, they were on the cover of 944.
Courtney was on the cover of 944, yeah. And we did a whole bunch of events. We launched a tequila thing with, I still have the boxes with like Kim on the thing. She walked in fashion shows for us. I mean, we were very tied into that group at the time. And I got a lot of shit for working with them and putting her in the cover, because at the time they were like, these reality stars, they're famous for nothing. What are you doing? Like, they're never gonna, this is a bullshit thing. They're gonna be fucking, in 3 months, no one's gonna care about them. Yeah. This is so stupid. Why would you, like, I'm like, no, you don't understand. These are like, they are like business people. And Kim, it didn't matter what she was doing for us. If it was coming to work she was serious. Like, I never saw someone. I was like, wow, this girl is no bullshit.
So, sorry, before you continue, I just want to give you kind of my Kim story. Yeah. So I actually met Kim. I met Chris, their mom, and I was at her house. I had a business kind of around celebrities. We were monetizing their Facebook pages. So I had an office in LA. So I met with Chris twice at her house, and I met with Kim. I met with Kim and Chloe at Chloe's house. Yeah. And I have to say, I mean, obviously, like, I was a little nervous meeting Kim Kardashian, and she's probably the most famous person on the planet. Yeah. And I remember meeting her, and there were two things that I really noticed about her. Number one is her not modesty, but her humbleness. Yeah. Because when she walked into the room, she said, "Hi, my name is Kim," and I think she obviously knows that I know who she is, and I'm sure she introduces herself to everyone that way. So I thought she just had a humble air about her when she introduced herself. And when we sat down to talk about the opportunity, I ended up not doing business with them. It didn't go through, but when we talked about the opportunity, she seemed so intelligent and so, she asked the right questions. She would always look me in the eye when she spoke with me. Like, I had the feeling that her being around the top, like, legal minds, business minds, developing her own business, the mentorship she got from her mom, you could really see it. So totally. You see it too,
she's
right?
No joke. She's, and she takes it it's a business. And even from early in the little promotional gig at a nightclub, she took it as like, it was, she wasn't like the other ones. Right. You knew, and not just, I'm saying not even her sisters, just like all of those other girls, she took it like a real business. It didn't matter. So
she was determined from day one.
She was determined from day one.
But tell me about Kanye. I started asking about Kanye.
Kanye, doing a gazillion, we've done so many things with him.
But tell me the story about.
So we take this space next to Zizi's in Miami, this restaurant, Members Club restaurant.
In Design District.
And Surface had this like thing called Surface Air. It was like a pop-up kind of design and art studio. He comes by after dinner, and we had a really impressive art collection and really great furniture. And he's like, floored by like some of the pieces that we had in there and everything. And he comes in and he's like, this woman Katie was there that night too, and he's like, oh my God, like he starts sitting down, hanging out, and he's just like hanging out like in there, and he's just like, I'm feeling something about this space. Like,
so you weren't there, right?
I wasn't there that moment. I was at home.
What year was this?
I don't know, 2 years ago, maybe.
Okay, so it's recent. Yeah.
Recent, a year or two ago. And he's like having this whole thing, and they're like texting me, and I'm at home. I'm like, it's like 11 p.m. at this point. I'm like, I'm not getting up right now to go there. And they're like, well, no. And he comes to me. He's like, all right, I want to do my new album here. I want to do the album.
What does he do? He wants to record.
He wants to record the album here. Is like, this is a space of greatness, And he was on one of his like kicks. I'm like, all right, whatever. They're like messaging me that he wants to take the space. I'm like, okay, how much is he gonna pay? And the girls are like, no, it's Kanye West. Like, we should just like let him do. I'm like, no, we shouldn't. I'm like, we have a business. What do you mean? We're just gonna like let him do that? He's got a recording. He's a billionaire. I'm not a billionaire. He's a billionaire. Yeah. He could pay us for the space. And so this goes back and forth, and his agent and they're like, he wants to do it tonight. He wants to record tonight. He wants to start at 6 a.m. So he's like, we have 12 hours. We have to remove everything from the space. He only wants one piece of art in there. This amazing black artist that we had, and he wants nothing else in there. But he wants the remains of all this amazing art there, because he said it was creating this energy for him, and it had to get turned into a recording studio. So I'm like, guys, I'm not funding this. This is going to be like hundreds of thousands of dollars to pull an emergency crew in. So like we worked on some deal at like midnight to like get them to, to hire these emergency like art, creators to come in and create all the art and move all the furniture and recording people to bring in all the music stuff.
Create all the art, to package the art, to safely remove it.
Yeah, because it was expensive art.
Yeah.
And then they had to put in all the recording equipment and all of his like musical equipment and keyboards and microphones and audio stuff. And so that went on for like from like 11 p.m. all the way to like nonstop. Must have been 50 people working on this thing. And they go to start the next morning, and two of his people start doing mic check, and that's exactly when this stuff happened with his kids in California, and Kim and him started fighting. So he like bolts out to.
Sorry, did he end up paying?
At the end, yes.
Okay.
But it was a lot of back and forth.
Sure.
But yeah, then he like bolted to go to California to deal with all the stuff that was happening then, and there was always something with him. When I remember Kim, we did this the night she got robbed was at I was doing a dinner she came to.
Was it in Paris?
In Paris.
Paris, yeah.
And we were hosting a dinner for Alaya. He was on the cover of Surface, and I had Kim and Courtney come that night, and that was the night that the robbery went down. After the dinner, sent him like back with him. He was like, "What the fuck?" Like, I was like, it had nothing to do with, it was just a fucked up situation. But he did talks with us. He'd done musical events. He's whatever's going on in his life, that's his own thing. I'm always a believer of you separate the art from the artist.
Yeah.
Like, obviously as a, Jewish background, I have a lot of, angst with, what he said and what he did. He doesn't take away the fact that he's a musical genius. He's incredibly talented, incredible genius. I might have issues with his personal beliefs and stuff, but that doesn't take away from, his talent as a musician. And I hope he gets the help he needs and everything, and comes back. I'm Jewish too, right? Like you obviously know that. When that whole thing went down with Kanye, I have to tell you, like, I want to be careful how I say this, but it didn't bother me that much. Yeah. And I'm pretty like sensitive when it comes to anti-Semitic, comments as a Jew. But with Kanye, I just think he's troubled. Yeah. And most of the time, I wouldn't, like, with people behave badly, I don't let kind of whatever's going on with them, like saying they're under stress or they have some kind of a mental kind of illness or problem. I don't usually, like, in my mind, like, give them a pass on that because of that. I think people should still be accountable. But I don't know what it is about Kanye that there's something else there. There's something else there, and I never, it didn't hit me personally. Like, I got to tell you, like, when the whole thing that happened with Balenciaga, with like this, that crazy campaign that they did, I like right away, like, I was a big fan of their stuff. I have I had a lot of their products. I just stopped wearing it. I just stopped, because to me that crossed the line. But there's something about Kanye that what he said, I don't know. It's hard to explain. But to your point, you separate the art from the artist. But I didn't take it offensively. I just think he's troubled. It's not even mental illness. He's just troubled. And I actually felt a lot of sympathy from him when he started going on those rants about Jewish people. No, totally. And there's something else behind it. He's because he is as an artist, he's incredibly talented. So
he is. Marc, thanks, man. I really appreciate you doing this.
Thanks, man.
And we should arrange dinner with the girls.
Awesome.
At Dorsia. I'll pre-purchase it before we go.
I gotta say, as the ending, when I saw, because I remember the night that we had that discussion after in the car ride home, and it's like, well, is that uncomfortable? Like, with like
you're asking.
Eden was like messaging, like telling me in the car. It's like, was that an uncomfortable conversation? Because I remember there was like, you were into it, but also pushing back a lot, and I respected the pushback, especially as
I hope I did it in a constructive way.
No, you did it in a very constructive way, but it was, I don't need anyone just like, oh my God, it's amazing. Like, I like the pushback because it challenges me and stuff like that. But when you applied, it was like a moment for me, because I was like, all right, I remember the conversation. I remember, there was, you had that skepticism too, which I also appreciated. And it made me feel good. I was like, all right, like, I remember that conversation, and he applied on his own. that's a good feel. It was like, all right.
Oh, okay. Well, that's nice. That makes me feel good.
It felt good.
But to be, again, just so I want to reiterate, I was excited about the concept because the concept behind it with, the whole supply and demand management, that all of the things that we talked about, like to me, it was a brilliant idea. I was just concerned about the execution.
The operation, yeah.
But I have to tell you something. I have to tell you something. It's really important that my skepticism didn't come, if I really have to kind of dig deep, it didn't come from a place of me not, it came from a place of my own fears, like my own weaknesses, because I know I can't build technology like that. Like I know that the complexities of building the technology and executing on this business plan is beyond what I'm able to do. I have other amazing skills and talents that I've built businesses and I continue to do so, but that in particular, so that was more my insecurity talking than anything else.
It was a great conversation and it was awesome.
Because again, like now that you've told me about all your experiences and all the technology you've built and the infrastructures that you've built, now I understand why you've been able to execute on it. And again, the proof point continues to come out with people like, over and over again mentioning it.
Thank you so much, man.
Thanks, man.
Awesome.
Great having you, man.
Thanks so much.